Let's quickly get into this, and then I also want to get into Nyaho Nyaho Tamaklo and General Nunu Mensah have been speaking on the issue of the state of affairs of Ghana. I want us to get into that, but before we do, Cecilia Dapaah, she is saying now that the processes are still ongoing, and she is saying her lawyers are saying that the freezing of her bank accounts is wreaking havoc on her, so to speak. Excessive hardship is being brought to bear. We heard about her deceased brother's account and transactions going on, and she says these are merely for the school fees of his children and all of that. But now we also hear that the Federal Bureau of Investigation of the USA has been roped in, collaborating with the Office of the Special Prosecutor. Your take?
Yeah, so first I will... usually you would not want to wish anybody going through what Cecilia Dapaah is going through. Obviously, if your accounts are frozen and you have no access to your funds, ordinarily it should have a toll on you, unless maybe you are some supernormal person. So I can understand the basis for which the lawyers of Cecilia Dapaah had gone to court to ask for an expedite, what do you call it?
The process, right.
The hearing,
right.
on the frozen accounts and then the seized funds. So I can understand. So to a very large extent, I think in my very humble and uneducated mind, legal mind, I think that it was a fair thing to, by the court, to say that, look, we want to hear this very quickly, so that determination is made. Two, I think the Cecilia Dapaah should also not be worried. You see, even as public officers, we are all enjoying that. Before you even take up your
portfolio, you declare your assets.
In fact, the NDC, as a party, ensured that all parliamentary candidates in the last elections declare their assets.
Does that thing really work? There has been talk about the fact that people even present blank sheets of paper, and honestly,
how do you know that?
Fine.
How do you know that?
I'm saying that's why I'm saying from the grapevine. But I'm saying technically, if a lot of these people we see come into government, in and out of government, people who some will tell you have never really done anything before entering politics, and there are so many of them on different sides, okay, and then you look at them before entry into government, and you look at them a short while after.
They've become so posh.
And you ask yourself, under normal circumstances, even if the person were making about, let's even be charitable, 50,000 cedis a month, which is not the salary of a minister or even a deputy or an MP anyway, I think it's only the president thereabouts who has something in that range, and the vice. How possibly they could come up with such assets within... you don't need to be a soothsayer. You don't need to look into a crystal ball and see that something is amiss.
I perfectly agree with you.
So the system is not working.
Yeah, so the system actually is not working. To say it's working is... my argument is not based on that. I'm just trying to say that I was trying to make the point that you see the OSP had written to her to declare her property and assets. One of the cases that the OSP has sent to court now is based on the fact that she had refused to declare those assets when she was written to. And I'm just saying that as a public officer, the first thing you should have done was that, even in assuming that office, the law says that you should declare that. So all you may have been doing now will be to do an update of that. She has refused to get into that deal. But you see, when you have a country that is suffering so much, you have a country that people simply, by virtue of the leadership of the current crop, that includes you, people basically have lost their life savings. People have lost their jobs. People cannot pay for the fees of their kids. Then suddenly you see that in your in your house, you have such huge sums of money there. And if what the OSP says and what we read in the newspaper is anything to go by, and I'm very careful because some of the parts of the cases are in court and I don't want to deal with those. Right. But if what we read in the newspaper is anything to go by, you have a situation where even some monies that are found within your property, you seem to say that you don't even know where the
OSP seemed to suggest, and I saw a curious article by Elizabeth Ohene on it, which I don't want to even get into, but seemed to suggest that she had concealed parts of them in different parts of the home. But the other argument is that, of course, when you have money, you don't just leave it lying. When you have helps at home and all of that, you don't just leave it lying. You put them in places where even if a robber came home, they wouldn't have very clear access to.
You have a situation where government officials are telling all of us that we must, as much as possible, see how we can bank our monies. We should send monies to them, and there's always an encouragement to do that. Then you have one of the principal officers of the economy have such huge sums of money in the house. Figures that they are scandalous to the poor man. When you look at them, when you look at the figures that they are mentioning in their various homes. And the Cecilia Dapaah's own becomes, in my mind, if you can find this with in the house of sanitation and water resources minister, what then happens in most of the, in my estimation, the richer ministries. What do you expect? But of course, you have a situation where it tells you the level of corruption in this country. And it gives a bad name to everybody who is in public office. Because now, there was just a survey that was just done by, Global Info Analytics, after this Cecilia Dapaah's case, as to whether Ghanaians believed that politicians kept such huge sums of money in their homes. And you'll be surprised at the figure, huge figures, in the levels of about 70%, that people believe that politicians keep such huge sums of money. Why do politicians keep those things? Because they know that they will have to explain if they have to put them in accounts. They cannot explain those. So
let me put that to you. Since you're a politician, why do you politicians do that?
I've just told you the reason why politicians, and I'm making this point very clearly. Broadly. The reason why, you see, because, look, I give you a typical example. Just recently, I sold a vehicle of mine, and then they had to pay it into my account.
Right.
What happened was that my bank called me and asked me, they've just seen some sudden
large sum of
money deposited in my account. And I said yes, because I had sold a property, and that is what I put there.
And that call came through because you're a politically exposed person. And some of us are even that. So when there are transactions,
immediately I needed to send the documentation to my bank to explain that, that transfer into.
Which is what should be the case.
Yes, that should be the case. Now, the situation is that the reason why you have people like Cecilia Dapaah and co put such huge sums of money in their houses is that if it should go to bank, how are they going to account for it? How are they going to explain the expenditure? How are they going to explain the sudden money that has been transferred into the thing? So yes, you will see these things, but it goes back.
But explanations have been given. Some 200,000 was supposed to belong to, is it a daughter or a niece or something?
And there's no.
That's what her husband said. There have been explanations about the deceased brother's account still funneling funds. The explanations have been given.
Yes, so it is for the court to have a determination on those things, and I don't want to prejudge her before that. But I'm just saying that the optics of it is not good. The optics of it seem to suggest that, look, people would have known you over a period. You remember that they said his brother owned some X amount of money. People from the neighborhood where he was a chief said that the man in his lifetime knew that the way they saw him, just generally, is the point you were making, that you see the person that before the person goes into government, suddenly you see that the person's circumstances would have changed so drastically. They knew the circumstance of the man. And they knew that looking at the circumstances in which he found himself, some even say he was a cobbler or something like that, to have such huge sums of money simply was not true. So these are people who had stayed with them. But it is not for me to make that determination.
Right.
I believe the church, but it goes back to speak on the issue of corruption. That in this country, CDD has indicated that if you look between 2017 till now, the amount we lose annually, corruption, is about $3 billion.
It's somewhere between 3 and 6 billion.
Yeah, dollars. So if you have situations, do you know how much 3 billion can do for all of us?
3 billion is what we've gone to the IMF
That's
for.
something. And so what it simply means is that even if as a country we even have this, we may not need to be begging IMF to meet some conditionalities before we get $600 million. That is the implication of this. And this government consistently has shown that the platform from which they came into government, fighting corruption, creating jobs, and so let me use the word of fighting corruption, they have woefully failed. And the painful part of it is that you have a president who, even before the determination of state institutions on this matter, in accepting the resignation of the minister, goes on to make a pronouncement that seems to suggest that, oh, I know you are not guilty and you will be free.
He said he was certain that her integrity would shine through at the end.
No, but as the head of the country, as the CEO of corporate Ghana, I'm just looking at it as Ghana as a corporate entity, you should not be the one to make this statement. Right. And you see, no, it is consistent. You know, this Attorney General thing that had come. It's not the same thing. You remember that when
you say this Attorney General thing, is it the Frimpong Boateng where he says it is empty? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes. So when he said that it was not what the Attorney General said, it was empty. But if you look at the statement that was issued in April of 2019 by the president, he had indicated very clearly that that these were just a list of grievances. He himself had cleared the man before even the principal officers, whether the CID or the even went into the case.
Okay, so
I'm just telling you that this is
staying on that trajectory. We have to go in a bit. There's also Dr. Nyaho Tamaklo. He needs no introduction. Yeah. We've also had General Nuno Mensah. Both of them had a press conference.
Yes.
And they had a bit to share. I want to share with you part of what Nyaho Tamaklo, doctor, says. He says he questions why important individuals and organizations in the country are silent, and he's calling on citizens to speak truth to power. And then he quoting him, he says, individuals who constantly spoke truth to power some years ago to emerge from the self-imposed, I don't know what word this is, to speak to government we have now. Where are the Otabills, the Duncan Williams, the Reverend Martes, and the Dag Heward Mills, and the many civil society organizations and crucial and critical journalists, he bemoaned. What do you think about that? We're here doing critical journalism, holding the feet of power to the heat or the fire of accountability, and we will do it to you too, as we have always done, without batting an eyelid. Why do you think we've got to this point where they feel things are simply not going well, and those who should speak truth to power are not?
Look, anybody who's a keen observer of the political terrain in our country here will know that things have changed. And I say this on the strength of the fact that if you look, let's just use the immediate past government, and that is the NDC. If you look at the people who used to come out and speak, and sometimes it was almost like directly just insulting the intelligence of even the officers who were there. And suddenly, things have become worse. And such people have lost their voice. It becomes a problem. You remember the famous Nyansafuo? You remember that famous
Nyansafuo
Reverend Mante. And this was, he said that if you gave him the opportunity, in how many days he would have solved the power issues. This was a man who was speaking out of even ignorance, because he didn't even know exactly what the situation was. But was bold on public using their church pulpits to really chastise government on that. And suddenly, the same situation or even worse happened. They are quiet. And so I can understand.
But that's a choice, right?
Yeah, it's a choice. But you see, I will have a situation to say that anytime the shoe is on the other foot and you are speaking, I won't take you serious. You are a hypocrite. Because if you are a person of principle, and you see, these people are listening to because of what they represent. They are listening to because they are the clergy, and they think that, look, if you were to go into Duncan Williams' church, or you were to go to Otabel's church, or you were to go to Reverend Mante's church, this is a place where you have both NDC, NPP, and other things. They are all there, isn't it? So these are people will think that they will be speaking to the facts. They will be speaking based on principles. They will be speaking based on what they think is true. But if you have a situation where you speak as a result of patronage, because these were people that obviously you would have not, based on the conduct as we see now, that these were people who were patronizing who are patronizing the current government, and therefore have a challenge in criticizing them. Even one of them had said that he has stopped reading national news and is now watching this animal, the thing they do on TV,
Nat Geo,
you know,
Nat Geo Wild.
Nat Geo Wild. That's what he's now watching, animals and other things. He has stopped even. Why have you suddenly found interest in watching those things instead of being interested in national issues? I am just telling you that these are things that are very unfortunate. In terms of, you were talking that you are being critical because as a journalist, you know that you have colleague journalists who, before 2017, they were household names. Even in this your station here, they were household names, but suddenly they cannot be found anywhere.
I do not know.
No, I am telling you, I have. You see, that's why I'm making the point that we had journalists who were almost everywhere talking and making, and when they speak, you would think that at the end of the day, they will, if you were to give them this thing to say handle, they will handle. Or maybe they were people of integrity. And suddenly, the Nigerians will say that when there's food in your mouth, you don't talk, because that's not courteous, isn't it? And you will see that is happening. And for me, where I find, let me also state very clearly that there are very fine journalists. There are very fine journalists who will really, irrespective of who is involved, as long as it is the question of, because I have dealt with, for 6-7 years, I was dealing with journalists. That was my job. And so I know some journalists, and I've known their behavior over the period. And I have known some journalists that suddenly,
well, I'll tell you this for a fact. I see where you're going, and I know of why exactly you're going on that trajectory. But here, we try our hardest. It's a human institution, but we try our hardest to live by the tenets of independent, fearless, credible.
I see that you put as part of your, you put that as,
and that is what we aspire to.
No, I see, and now I'm saying, you see, it will be wrong to use the same brush
to paint everybody.
Right. So I agree with you. And that's why I've stated that we have a good number of journalists who simply do their work and do their work very well. I have known, for example, that your station here has come under serious criticism because some of you have chosen to hold the government to account. I have seen those things. Some of your hosts, I remember one of the days, there was a press conference that was being done somewhere. And surprisingly, when they listed a number of, media houses, I didn't hear Joy FM on it. So I sent a message to the person and said, how come that your station is not part of this place? Because I know that you have come under the heat over some of these issues. But that does not still defeat the point that says that there are a number of media houses and journalists who, before 2017, were household names. They could criticize, they held the government accountable, and it confirms what John Mahama said, that if he did at even 10% of what this current government is doing, he wouldn't have served his full term.
Edward Bawa, thank you so much for joining us this morning not for tea, but for a hot conversation.
See, I didn't even get a cup of water even to drink. Ben.
We'll take care of you. We'll give you some Awake Purified drinking water after this. But